Hello, welcome to part 3 of our section about prototype modeling. In this video, we're going to do an example with OpenSCAD, or I might call it OpenSCAD as well. And our goal here is to make an open top box. And it's just going to use a couple of commands, but it'll give you a feel for how it works with this particular software. And notice there's a cheat sheet online that gives you a whole lot more commands that you can work with to do many more things. But let's start off with a cube. So I'll type the word cube. And a cube is actually just a rectangular box. And so I want it to be 10 millimeters on one side, 8 millimeters on another side, 4 millimeters. And notice OpenSCAD is calling it width, depth, and height. And it also gives me an option to put center equals true. So let's see what that does. And then I'm going to end this with a semicolon. Notice I'm typing this in the editor. So this is the editor box. This is the 3D axes where we'll see our image here in a moment. And then this is the console that just sometimes gives us information. And then there's lots of shortcut buttons here that you can play around with. But the main button we'll need is the one with the double arrows, and that generates our image. Notice I can use my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and zoom out. I can drag it around to look at every dimension. And then if you want certain perspectives, you can come down here and get different perspectives for your box. Now, what if I did not want that center equals true? How does that change things? So if I delete that and re-render it, then notice I get a box. And if I want to be consistent with the negative axes and the traditional directions, notice it starts at 0, 0, 0, and then makes the cube in the positive X, Y, and Z direction. Now, depending on what you're doing, either one of those options might be better. I'm going to keep the center equals true option there, but for a lot of situations, either one is fine. All right, so let's say I want to carve out a hole out of this box, another rectangular shaped hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another cube, but this time it's going to be a little smaller, so 8, 6, and 4. So now same width, same depth, or different, a smaller width, smaller depth, but the same height. And because I don't want to mix up my options here, I'm also going to say the center is true. And to tell the difference between the two, I'm going to say the color of this second box is blue. All right, and if you want to keep these separate, you can even put a couple of empty lines here to separate your two objects. I can once again hit preview. And it's a little odd because it you can kind of see it and you kind of can't. You can see the blue, but it also kind of looks yellow. A little hard to tell what's going on. And that's because our heights are exactly the same. So it's basically infinitely thin, this difference between yellow and blue. And so that registers as some kind of noise or interference on OpenSCAD. Well, we don't really want to have an empty box anyway. We want it to have a base so I can put things in it. So what I really need to do is lift this box up a little bit. And that's called a translation. So let me use translate. And once again, it's going to be X, Y, and Z. I don't want to move it left or right, or forwards or backwards, but I do want to move it up. So let's move it up 1.5 millimeters. Let's see what that does. And now notice it looks a little cleaner. The base is definitely the base. There's nothing fuzzy going on down there. And now we can see how the top of the box is sticking out. So if this was actually what we wanted, we could stop here and render it using the hourglass button. And then we would get the shape that looks like this. Notice you get a little bit of information here. It tells you the top level object is a 3D object. It says it's simple. Those are good signs. Some of these other things May or may not be necessary to know, but it's always good when it doesn't give you any error messages in the console area. Of course, this is not an open top box. This is more like a pedestal. So what do I do if I actually want to delete this inner box from the outer box? Right? Or in other words, delete the blue box from the yellow box. Well, for that, I use the difference command. Make sure you don't forget to put the double parentheses, even though we're not actually going to put anything inside those parentheses. And then I need to open and close the braces. So notice the way the difference command works is that it takes the first object, whatever that is, and then it subtracts whatever comes after it. So in other words, I could have multiple things. Maybe if I wanted to have a circular hole here, I could subtract that by putting another cylinder below that, and I could subtract another square from another side. So I could subtract a lot of things, but the first object is always going to be the original object. So let's see how that works by previewing it again. Notice I can click this or hit F5. And now notice my shape has changed. Now there's a hole, just like we wanted. And if I wanted to render that again to see it kind of in its true form, then there it is. And once again, I get good news down here in my console box. Now, if we had decided we wanted something a little thicker, a bigger hole, I can make this a 9 and a 7. So I'll have thinner walls, and or let's say I just wanted this box to be bigger as well, I could change that. So there's lots of options you could do. If you wanted to add something here in the middle or something on the outside, you can use the union command. It works just like difference, and then that will, just like it says, union or add those objects together to make a single object. Of course, they have to intersect for that to make sense. But generally speaking, that is the way these commands work for an object like this. When you are happy with it, you can render it, and then you can hit the STL button, which exports it, and then that saves it as a file, and you can choose where to save it, make sure it's .stl, and then you can reopen it in your slicing software and begin the 3D print. So that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.